Welcome to the Frontlines of Leadership podcast, where my guests tell stories and share principles to inspire the rising generation of leaders. Today, I'm honored to welcome a friend and a mentor, Mark Gillespie, to the podcast. Mark currently serves as a senior program manager for new product integration at GE Aerospace, where he leads cross-functional teams focused on future power generation, systems development, production, and customer support. He stepped into this role in November 2021 after an extraordinary 28-year career in the United States Army. Mark retired from the Army at the rank of colonel, having commanded one of the Army's largest helicopter attack and reconnaissance battalions at the Aviation Center of Excellence. In that role, he was responsible for 8 advanced helicopter training programs, nearly 1,000 soldiers, civilians, and contractors, oversight of a $42 million budget, and the execution of a flight program exceeding 65,000 annual flight hours. Following his military command, Mark served as a senior strategic military advisor, reporting directly to the Missouri Adjutant General, where he guided senior leaders on training, readiness, sustainment, and mobilization. Throughout his career, he also held key operational, tactical, and policy-shaping roles, including aviation doctrine development and service as an aviation branch assignment officer at U.S. Army Human Resources Command. Mark is a combat veteran whose awards include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, and the Combat Action Badge. He is a senior aviator rated in the OH-58D observation helicopter and a graduate of Air War College, where he earned a Master's of Science in Security Strategy. Mark, thank you for joining us today. It's an honor to have you on the Front Lines of Leadership podcast. All right, Mark, let's jump in. Thanks again for being willing to come on, but we'll just jump in and start with the first question.
You bet.
Sweet. So, as I shared with you, the front lines of leadership is going to be focused on real stories about real leaders, and stories that shaped them, to learn from leaders in their lives, and also how they've become greater leaders themselves. So, the first question I want to start with is, who is one of the greatest leaders you've had in their life, and a story that helped you realize the leadership attributes that they possess that made their leadership stand out to you?
So, as you know, and it'll probably come out here and maybe the intro, but Jackson and I have a relationship connected by your dad. And your dad is probably one of the greatest leaders, greatest mentors that I've had in my life. I've served in the military. I'm a civilian now, but was fortunate enough to serve 28 years and had numerous engagements with your dad as my leader and just working with him. And he is one that I revere highly. And then, honestly, just like my dad, my biological father, right? Two different leaders, right? My dad, but they had some of the same characteristics. Your dad being in the military, us being in the military, kind of direct leadership for that, and then my dad being the father of the house. But yeah, some of the leaderships that stood out for me is both of them humble, right? Humble leaders. They were compassionate. They showed compassion to others. They both had discipline, right? Leadership is discipline. It's tough, but you got to be disciplined on some of those things that stand out. And they were forgiving, right? I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. But they realized that, hey, when things don't go right, they understood that, hey, it's the process, not the person, and they were willing to forgive me and give me another chance, right? And there's numerous times where your dad gave me, lots of chances to succeed through my mistakes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love those. I mean, you mentioned humility,
Yeah.
discipline, and then as a leader, being willing to forgive
Yeah.
those you lead when they make mistakes.
Yeah.
Is there anything you mentioned that there's numerous times where, my dad or your dad showed, you making a mistake and then being willing to work with you through that? Can you touch more on that, on how that shaped you as a leader, or any specific scenarios you might have? Anything you can add to that?
Yeah. You know, sometimes you learn these mistakes. Like, for example, my dad instilled this in me, but sometimes in the military, especially as a young leader um, in the military, you're trying to make a name for yourself, right?
Right.
And you're aggressive, you're loud,
Yeah.
um, you're directive, right? Some of these things, these attributes that I learned to be in humble, compassionate, and forgiveness, kind of go by the wayside sometimes, right?
Right.
And it wasn't until I come back around and serve with your dad at a station at Fort Knox with the Human Resources Command. That really those kind of it's gonna be a time to mature through that of understanding that hey, leadership's not necessarily about being the loudest,
Mm.
right? Just because you're the loudest doesn't make you right. Um, and it is about compassion and developing leaders. Your dad was a great developer of leaders. He is a great developer of leaders.
Mhm.
And he does that through leading by example. And I
Yeah.
learned a lot of things from him of how he disciplines people, right? How he encourages people, how he develops people, right? And gives them opportunities. Because sometimes your dad, sometimes and I've seen this, I've kicked rocks and say, why doesn't he do this briefing? Or why doesn't he do that? Like he's in charge, like he's supposed to do this, like he's
Yeah.
the leader. But it was him shaping me and giving me the exposure and the experience to learn, right? And giving me opportunities, reps and sets at a much lower risk level,
Yeah.
right? So when I was ready to step into those positions later on in my life, right, I was ready.
Mhm.
And I had learned that. So that's one of his I think one of his things that I took away from him is um, development. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
great developer of talent, great developer of leaders, and he finds opportunities to put people in places at the right place at the right time in front of the
Mhm.
right people. And what
Right.
I didn't know about your dad is a lot of times he's shaping behind the scenes. I'm scared to death to do this. But he's already pretty much set, he's allowing me uh, opportunities to develop and make decisions, right? He's not shaping it so much that the decision's already made, right? There's free will and there's latitude in that. But he has already kind of pre-briefed some people to say, hey, this is what's going on. And
Mhm.
so, it was a little bit easier. My fears of what I thought was going to happen didn't happen,
Right.
right? So,
And I love that. And to touch on that, like in my experience, I can say all the same things about my dad being
yeah,
not from a standpoint of me being directly in his organization, but as a dad,
yeah,
putting
yeah,
me in situations to succeed without knowing like he's giving you opportunities to do things that are scary, that take courage
yeah,
and take growth, but there's going to be some success there that allows you to grow. And like you mentioned, why isn't he doing this briefing? Why can't
yeah,
he do this presentation?
yeah.
But would you have learned what you learned if you, sure, you would have learned something from watching him do it, but would you have learned as much
That's right.
as doing it, you know?
That's right.
And so I really like that. And kind of another question for you along these lines is in a leader, we see, for example, you talking about my dad in the army,
Yeah.
you see these principles of humility, discipline,
Hmm.
forgiveness, setting people up to have experience to succeed.
Hmm.
And then I'm sure you've applied that in your own leadership. And from the standpoint of someone who's young, striving to build their own leadership skills, whether that's in business, in my relationship with my wife,
Yeah.
friends, teammates, whatever it is, how do you learn those and then apply them to your own leadership? Because you can learn them and I can see them in someone else, but maybe some insight into how do you apply those? And I
Ooh.
this is a question off my dome, off my head, but
Yeah. No, no, no. How do you apply? Man, I'm gonna try to answer the question, but it's not necessarily like a black and white answer, right?
yeah.
If you do A, B, and C, you're applying that, and
Mhm.
and I think there's a learning process. I mean, look, you know, leadership is challenging. It's
Mhm.
messy. It's hard. you develop habits along the way. You don't just arrive there, right? There's no um, metric for success, and I've culminated, and now I'm a self-ordained leader. I think it's
Right.
a journey, right? And you're constantly applying those lessons of applying the situation. And I want to say situational based leadership, but it is kind of that way, right? There's some times where you need to be more of a listener, right? And listen to the team to build the team. And there's certain times that you need to be a lot more proactive and directive in giving guidance and intent. So I think, what I would say that has shaped me is again, these are not lessons that I learned straight off and just that I was successful all the time early on.
Hmm.
These are things I developed over time, but you need to be engaged, right? You need to be consistent. Um, and when you're engaged and consistent and aware of what's going on, then you can apply those kind of leadership principles we were kind of talking about of, hey, this is a young team. I probably need to be more directive in my guidance,
Hmm.
right? Um, that's the thing I can talk about a lot of. There's a lot of people that their leadership style is, I use this, and I've kind of used this term in the last year, kind of like bring me a rock, right? I'm in charge,
Hmm.
right? And I want you to do this. Well, sometimes we're not so clear in our guidance um, that they bring you something. It's not what you thought, right?
Right.
They're doing the best they can to get what you need to get done, and then you say, well, "That's not what I want," and then they go back, and
Hmm.
they continue to bring you rocks until you say, "Okay, you finally brought me the right rock." And it's wasteful, it's time consuming, it's frustrating, it doesn't build trust, it doesn't build confidence. So I think as a leader, that I've learned over the time is again being consistent in guidance. I mean, one story I'll tell you: when I took battalion command, you go to in the army, you do this great ceremony, and you feel on top of the world in
Yeah.
1 second, and then you take the guide on, and then it's sheer terror for the rest of the years that you're in command. And my staff, I said, hey, I'll meet you guys later on, and we'll talk. And so after change command, my wife and I were cleaning up from the ceremony, stuff like that. Family was in town. And later on that afternoon, I went out to the battalion just to kind of collect some things out of the office. I walk into the command staff room, and there's the commanders and the staff sitting at the table, sitting there. And I'm like, what are you guys doing here? They said, you wanted to talk to us. And I was like, but not today, right? They had literally been sitting there for 2 hours
Oh,
waiting
dang.
on me,
Yeah.
right? And I learned that of like being clear in your guidance. And I know I'm getting long-winded in this answer. I'm sorry. But
No, no, please.
but being clear in your guidance, but also being willing to allow the freedom to execute. That was
Hmm.
another lesson that I learned is, hey, give guidance. Um, as a leader, you owe it to yourself to get some white space to make sure that your guidance is good, right? You're not just giving off the cuff. And then let those leaders underneath you execute. Give them the latitude, equip them, right?
Hmm.
Train them and give them the resources they need to be successful, right? But also give them the latitude and freedom to execute. Because sometimes in your brain, I had an XO that I was very micromanaging because I didn't trust the guy, and it
Right.
wasn't a good relationship because he didn't execute the way I had trained and what I thought. Well, those were my training and my thoughts, right? But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, was he meeting the objective, right? Was he meeting my intent? The answer
Right.
was yes. The answer was yes. And I had to learn that the hard way through him. And he taught me a lot of like, sometimes people take the long way around to get to the objective, and some people just go directly there,
Right.
right? And so the end state is still the same. The objective is still accomplished. But just some of your leaders will do it differently than what you thought. And you just got to be comfortable with them doing that. And sometimes you're like, man, they're way off the path. This isn't going to work well. And at the end, they bring it back in, and it
Right.
works. So, um,
There's a lot of nuggets in there that we could
yeah,
take
yeah, I'm
hours to
sorry.
discuss. No, no, I'm glad you shared that, and I love hearing like this. Like I said, the specific stories, and that's why
Yeah,
I needed to start this to hear
yeah,
those stories. And you brought up things we mentioned already, principles, but then you brought
yeah,
in stories of patience,
yeah,
trust. Micromanaging. I'm sure a lot of people have dealt with either being
yeah,
a micromanager or being micromanaged.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of things we could take out of there, but I really appreciate you sharing that story. And one thing I'd like to note is like if no one ever listens to this episode of this podcast, which
Yeah.
you know that alone, like I learned from that story.
Yeah.
And so like I'm really grateful, like again, that you came on because
Yeah.
like I said, if no one else, another soul listens to this, I'm learning directly from you and for my own leadership
Yeah.
development as well. So thank you. Um, Jumping in, we I'd like to jump into another question, if that's all right.
Okay.
Um, a lot of times, people my age, whether they are in college, just graduated college, starting their first couple jobs, or starting their own business, whatever it is, a lot of times leadership is seen as holding a specific position,
Yeah.
holding a ranking or
Yeah.
management position,
Yeah.
whatever that might be. But a lot of times for young kids, young careers, you're not going to be in a leadership position per se.
Yep. Yeah.
So maybe we can speak to that as, when did you learn or how have you learned the importance of influence in leadership over position? If that's a good way to
Yeah. So
make sense.
there's a lot of goodness in that question. Thanks for answering it or asking it. But I'll use my example today, right? I got out of the Army, and sometimes, just like you said, when I was in battalion command, and you know this too, in the military, whoever's in charge gets their name written on the building, right? There's usually signs
Got
that
it.
says so and so, right?
Mhm.
This is the person who's in charge, and and okay, well, I didn't have to tell anybody in the battalion that I was in charge. They knew it, right? Your picture's
Right.
up everywhere, your name's on the building, right? They know that,
Hmm.
and so it's not about, hey, I'm in charge, don't you know? Kind of like positional, first
Yeah.
positional, right? Sometimes you're put in positions of leadership, and
Hmm.
sometimes you're not. But in my opinion, you're still always a leader, right? Whether your name is on the building, whether it's in your title, um, and something you talked about influence, and I was going to bring in today. Like I'm a program manager at GE Aerospace, right? So I am responsible for a lot of my portfolio is defense customers
Hmm.
we provide military products to them, and at the plant here, it's a manufacturing plant, right? As a program manager, I'm responsible for that program, a couple of programs, right? And those
Yeah.
metrics of delivering on time, you know, and making sure that the material's there on time. But if you look me up in the company website, right, I am an individual contributor, right? There is no lines underneath me. I don't have a team of people that report to me that I'm responsible for to
Right.
make sure that the material gets here on time, that the production schedule gets loaded, that it gets built on time, that it gets delivered on time, and all that stuff. I'm still responsible for that, right? So I still am responsible to my customers. So the power influence is huge. And that's what I do every day. And I will tell you this, sometimes we're talking about leadership. And I wrote this down of like, you have to be a good teammate to be a good leader at times, right? Because I am not their boss,
Right.
right? I can't go in and give them directives on what to do.
Hmm.
But so why do they do things when I go in there and ask them to do it?
Hmm.
Well, because when they ask me for help, I don't say I'm a program manager and that's beneath me and I shouldn't do it. I do it,
Right.
right? I help them,
Hmm.
right? I'm a good teammate to them. And they know that. They know that they can trust me. They know that when they're in need and they're struggling and they need help, they can ask me, and I will help them, whether
Right.
it's my direct job or not. And so mutually, if that influence works both ways, right?
Yeah.
Of hey, when I'm in need or when I need something, they will help me, even though they don't report to me, even though they have another boss, even though they may have two or three other priorities that their boss says they need to get done today. Um, they will do what I ask them to do because they know that number one, I have been there for them, and
Mhm.
that kind of gets into this. We could talk forever about servant leadership, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's a buzzword that gets thrown out a lot. I love it because that's like I started off today. Like sometimes leadership isn't about your name on the building or being the loudest. It's about taking care of people, right?
Yeah.
It's a relational ship. It's human. It's interactive, right? It's challenging. It's not about who's winning and who's losing. We don't keep score on that stuff. Um, but I would say for the younger people, influence is huge. That's how I do influence here at the plant, is I try to make a good teammate. I also try to, when I see a problem, try to fix a problem,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, because it may not be directly my responsibility to fix it, um, but it doesn't get better, right? It's a problem. It needs to be addressed. And sometimes people, those are supposed to, if not me, then who, right?
Right.
Um, and so um, helping solve problems too, and being a good teammate, solving problems. Hey, I'm too busy today. I got all kinds of customer meetings. I'm too busy for you. Well, they
Yeah.
got problems to solve too. Sometimes, you need to be a good teammate and help them solve those problems, or take lead and solve those problems. Be part of that team. Uh, anyways, I don't know if I answered it.
Yeah. No, you definitely did.
Off from anything else, but yeah.
No, I really like that. And what you brought up about servant leadership and
Um,
being a good teammate, because
yeah,
in your specific scenario, like you've brought up now at GE Aerospace,
yeah,
there's no org chart around under you of people
yeah,
you specifically report to you or anything like that. And so for a program to run, successfully, you have to be a
um,
good teammate. And for all the
um,
operations to get done successfully, that's how it has
yeah.
to be. And I wasn't expecting to share this story, but I've got a story about you
All
that I want to share.
right.
So as Mark mentioned, for anyone listening, Mark and I first met, well, where I got to know Mark was in South Korea when we lived there, and him and my dad worked together. And we lived in the same high-rise apartment building because we were in Korea, and that's how the housing was for the families. And so, and then Mark and my dad, you guys did, CrossFit every
Yeah,
morning at like 5 a.m. And my freshman year, I was like 14, I think 14, 15. And I started going every morning with Mark and my dad, to go work out with them and the soldiers every morning, 5 a.m. before school, before practice. And you bring up servant leadership, and you're not, I mean, you worked with my dad, you had soldiers there that reported
mhm.
to you at the gym, but like no one there I reported to besides, I guess I report to my dad, in a familial relationship.
Yeah,
I was just the high school kid there working out every morning with you guys.
yeah,
Um, but like one of the strongest things I remember about you, Mark, as a leader and being a good teammate and servant leadership is like how much people could rely on you, even in the gym. Like I remember you after workouts, everyone's exhausted. You're picking up weights, helping clean up the gym,
yeah,
or like when we were doing team wads, or
yeah,
working out. Like you could always rely on Mark to help you get through the workout. Like if we were on a team, and I was a probably weighed a buck 10, soaking wet back then, and so like
yeah,
I wasn't the strongest, and so it was always like you could rely on you, and you were a good
yeah,
teammate then, and like I always remember that, and now like I knew because of those foundational relationships with you that
yeah,
I could reach out and
yeah,
hopefully you could have said no to coming on the podcast, but you didn't, and so like even then as a 14-year-old, you were
yeah,
following. I could see that in you,
yeah,
so. I appreciate you sharing that, and I definitely think you're not just saying random buzzwords, but I really think you
yeah,
live that as a leader. So
yeah. One thing I'll pull that thread just a little bit more is one of the things that's helped me. Um, I know we say, but one of the rules, kind of values, and we say a buzzword is dignity and respect.
hmm
Dignity and respect, right? That transcends leadership to me.
hmm
Of it doesn't matter what rank you have. I've had a lot of leaders in the Army, right? In the Army, it's very hierarchical, matrix oriented, right? Everyone knows the ranks and stuff like that. But like you said at the gym, like there were all ranks there, right? Everybody knew your dad was the big boss, right? Um, and they knew that, right? But your dad still treated everyone the same, right? He
hmm
didn't treat a certain rank structure because of this, or hey, I'm officer enlisted. The rules of dignity, we respected each other, we treated each other with dignity when it came to that. And that just, to me, that's just a foundational thing of like leadership of, um, again, it's not about right or wrong sometimes, because I've, in escalation, I'm going to make it so right that I'm going to escalate this and stuff like that. But just the foundation thing of, I found that even in, some of the higher levels of leadership, of treating everyone this, with this dignity, it circles back around, right? It grows, and they know they count. They're not fearful of that. And when your subordinates or people you work with know that you're there for them, you're loyal, you treat them the right way, and you take care of them, they open up,
Yeah.
right? They open up, and they exercise initiative more. And they could have said, well, it's 4 o'clock, I'm going home, I don't care if this project gets done or not.
Yeah.
No, I'm part of the team. Mark's working hard, the team's working hard, I'm going to stay the extra hour to get this done tonight,
Hmm.
right? And then, rewarding that person the next day, or that time, and recognizing that person in treating that person, hey, thanks for doing that.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I like that.
yeah,
Dignity and respect transcend ranking and leadership.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Well, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you come on, Mark, is because, as has been shown, is your experience both in the military
Mhm.
and in business. Now at GE Aerospace, spending 28 years in the military. How do you see or leadership? Do you see it different? Like, do you think leadership is different between the military and business, the private sector? Or do you see leadership kind of transcend those barriers between military and business?
Wow, that's a great question. Um, it's really tough for me. I mean, I've been a civilian for 4 years,
Mhm.
right? And um, I do think it's tough, because I'm gonna say I think it's different, but I don't think there's anything different about leadership, right?
Mhm.
Leadership is the same. Um, in the military, we have schools that teach leadership, right? We have a developmental process, as you start to move up, right? There's education that goes along with that. There's self-development that goes along with that. It is ingrained. It is codified in the military structure.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing I will say is different than the civilian structure, is it's not. I'm not saying civilians are not great leaders, man. I work around some amazing leaders at GE Aerospace, right? That
Mhm.
have been developed. But again, in the civilian world, I see it a little bit differently, that you've got to be more of a self-developer, right? So you got to be more disciplined.
Okay.
To do that, you've got to kind of be more proactive in that, as opposed to the military, where again, it's a more codified process. So I don't think leadership is any different, but I do see the differences of theirs, of that the military does have a structured process for the civilians technically.
Yeah.
At least in the limited 4 years that I've been a civilian, um, I haven't seen that. But again, I'm surrounded by some great leaders, so I don't want to say that you're a civilian and you're never going to be a military as good as a military leader. That's not, hear me. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it's just a different process.
Mhm. And the reason I ask that is because I'm going to be interviewing people from every industry, hopefully military, business,
Yeah,
public service,
yeah,
education, whatever
yeah,
it is. And so I do think there's obviously going to be differences in structure and
yeah,
development education. But what I'm hearing is like you've been able to apply principles from the military
yeah.
similarly as you have in your 4 years as a civilian leader as well. And I think that's amazing. And I think that's what I really want. That's what I'm getting from my interviews so far is like leadership transcends industry.
Yeah,
And principles are able to be applied no matter where you are, no matter what room you're in, no matter what type of people you're around.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's cool. Well, we'll move on to a kind of a new question.
Okay.
In as I mentioned, this podcast being to inspire the younger generation. What do you see young leaders today doing well, and then what do you see that we tend to struggle with the most?
It's funny. I thought about that question a little bit. We talked about this before of like leadership not necessarily changing. I mean, I struggle with it. You know, I'm 55 years old, and I see the same things uh, younger generations did as I did as well.
Mm.
And the only thing that I think is different, the different modifiers is technology. Our
Okay.
technology has really, really advanced extremely fast. Like the younger generation, you know, my generation when I was your age, it was a print generation. It was a news that came on a couple of times a day. You know, there wasn't a constant news cycle. There wasn't the internet as prolific as it is today and expanded. So you were just constantly on, right? There is no end to the appetite for information that there is today as opposed to when I was younger. So I think
Right.
they do that well, right? You know, a leader today knows that, you know, some of the younger ones, they know how to filter through. I think young leaders today, they know how to filter through what is just kind of white noise and what is important,
Hmm.
right? Because there's so much of it, you
Yeah.
know, and leaders today are such they're faster thinkers, right?
Hmm.
And because today is there's information like, hey, if I go buy a car, when I bought a car, my first car, I had to believe what the salesman said, right?
Right.
Today I go buy a car and I can go figure out comparables and show that guy to say, hey, I can drive 5 miles away and get it for this price, right?
Yeah.
So the access to information, the access to that, I think they, you know, young leaders can learn from that. They need to do it well. I will tell you one thing that I would share with them that I learned. This is a tough one. Is eyes forward, right? Focus on you. Stay in your lane. You know, and I'm not saying that to say not be a good teammate, right? Always be a good teammate. But what I've seen and what I did and what I felt privy to is I was more worried about Jackson and him maybe showing up and outdoing me or getting a promotion or something like that. Hey, did you see Jackson? He did this.
Mm.
So and so did this. And we sometimes we lose focus on our own discipline, our own, you know, course, and we're worried about our left and right flanks and who's doing what there,
Right.
right? As opposed to just staying focused, staying disciplined, moving forward, doing what's right. I share this a lot of times. Like your boss knows, your dad knew, right? He knew the answers to almost every question that he asked me before he asked me the question,
Yeah.
right? Um, but also he's also watching, right? He knows who is real, you know, who's authentic, who has the, you know, the compassion, the leadership, the humility, the forgiveness, and who's the one that basically steals it,
Mm.
right? And takes it and then rebrands it as their own and comes into your boss like he has a new revelation, right?
Right.
Um, he knew that, right? And I would tell you, the younger generation, like your boss knows when you're working hard, they know you're working hard,
Hmm.
right? They might not say it. Some bosses are just different. Some are very communicative and they're very rewarding and they're very affirming, and some people are not,
Hmm.
right? And that's just the way maybe your boss is, and you need to understand your boss. Um, just the way I had to understand your dad, right? Is your dad a visual learner, right? Does he want graphs? Does he want slides? Does he want a paragraph, a sit rep? Does he, you know, how does he want that information? So
Hmm.
I'm way off topic on that one, but that just kind of goes into kind of like um, focus on yourself, focus forward, don't worry about left and right, um, and do what's right. Like, you know, and your boss knows, and he's
Yeah.
watching. And every once in a while, I will tell you this. Different from the civilian world to the army. You talked this before. Um, One of our core values in the army is selfless service, and so sometimes that can be caught off as maybe like weakness or fracking like this. So I had a friend who's a veteran that I talked to here at GE, and he was very distraught because his office mate was very all the time. Hey, I showed up to work on time. Hey, I did this project. Hey, look what I'm doing. Hey, look at this. Hey, look at this all the time.
Right.
And my friend, who's military, he just does it, right? We just do it out of duty, right? He's just doing his job, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't think anything of it because he's just doing his job. Like, this is what is required of me. I'm doing it to the best I can. I'm actually doing more than what I'm required to do. But he never really told that to his boss, right?
Yeah.
I will tell you, sometimes you have to balance that selfless service with a little bit of, especially in the civilian world, I will tell you, of making sure that you do when it's time to, I got to be careful how I say this. When it's time to brag, you brag, right?
Hmm.
I'm not saying that to be narcissistic or toxic, right? But sometimes you do have to, um, you know, tell the good stuff that you've been doing and be
Yeah.
okay to kind of take the glory every once in a while to say, yeah, I did do that. And
Hmm.
we did do this,
Yeah.
um, you know, um, and highlight some of the good stuff.
Yeah. No, to touch on that, like I'm only 25, so I don't have, a
Yeah.
ton of experience, but every single time I've had the opportunity to, as in my work, not
Yeah.
every day boasting
Yeah.
or whatever it is, I did this, I did this. Every single time I've had the opportunity to
Yeah.
share a team win, even
Yeah.
though like a contribution, it maybe have been like you're the only one who worked on it, or it was assigned to you, or whatever it is. Every
Yeah.
single time I've had the opportunity to share a team win, even if I did, a majority of the work, whatever it is,
Yeah.
eventually your leader, like you said, always knows,
Yeah.
and it always comes back to you. You know,
Yeah.
I think humility is one of the greatest leadership traits, and
Yeah.
I haven't been in all these, management roles or whatever it is, but I've
Yeah.
had the opportunity to lead on teams of my own, and every single time I cannot, like, as I think, whether it is school, internships, work, every single time as I've lifted the team, like I've
Yeah.
also been lifted as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And it kind of goes into my next question of, you know, like I said, someone who's my age may not have a formal position, a formal
Right.
ranking or whatever it is in their company or whatever it is. So how can someone like me, younger, they're in an entry level position or they're applying for
Yeah.
an internship or whatever it is. How can they start leading right now without waiting for a promotion or getting that job?
Yeah, I touched on this earlier. And I hate to retread this one, but
Oh,
you're
please do.
right. Like sometimes you're not in charge, right? You're not you know, the product line leader or the operations management leader or the plant leader. That positional position.
Hmm.
Um, but I will tell you, I said this before, and I retread it. Being a great teammate,
Yeah.
right? Being a great teammate, helping the team win. Uh, and I use this example too, and I kind of thread in the thing of like, hey, put the blinders on, don't worry about left and right, because I use this litmus test with young leaders like, okay, you're in your boss's shoes, and he's looking for someone to promote, right? He's going to promote talent. He's going to promote someone who is a good teammate, someone who sees problems, fixes problems
Yeah.
without exercises initiative, right? Someone who volunteers for additional duties, someone who does projects outside of their lane to help the team, someone who helps out someone else, right? Those are qualities and values that and then the person who is just kind of off in the corner squawking really loud noises and is kind of, there's a difference between dissenting views and just being a turbulent person, right? I think dissenting views are super important. As a leader, you need to surround yourself with people that aren't always like you. That can
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
dangerous, right? That's groupthink. That can lead down a road of future problems. So
Yep.
you need to have a good trusted agent. And I'm getting off the topic of that, but a good person who can come into your life and tell you, hey, people are talking. You're married. You're hanging around a certain person. It doesn't look good, right? And so they kind of give you a test. But anyways, I get back to the thing of, you got a person over here who's not a dissenter. They're just kind of negative, right? And they're always um, kind of bringing the team down or saying negative things or not exercising initiatives. And I say this thing as a young leader, like if you're the boss, who are you going to choose?
Right.
Right? Who are you going to choose in that promotion?
Mhm.
So focusing on the task, don't worry about left and right, being a good teammate, even though you're not in that leadership role, um, is going to put you in a position helping the team. People hire people that are positive and help,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Not people that are lazy, show up late, and are turbulent, right? They're knocking the team down or they're finding ways to be disruptive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Thank you for sharing that. I think
uh,
again, like it's important. We've touched on it multiple times now. Being a
yeah,
good teammate,
yeah,
no matter what field you're in, you will
yeah,
always work on a team. Like you
yeah,
mentioned, even if you're an organization of one,
yeah,
department of one,
yeah,
your job can't get done without being on a team. And in my last episode, I was interviewing a guy. He's retired military as well, and we got talking. And I eventually said, there is no leadership without a team. Like you can't,
yeah,
like leadership. The word leadership would not exist without multiple people.
yeah,
I mean, I guess you can lead yourself and become a better person, but ultimately being a leader involves other people.
yeah,
And so I think it's very important that, like you're saying, be a good teammate. So I appreciate that advice.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I always use the example of, I'm born and raised in Kansas City, and this will probably get you negative likes on your podcast. I'm a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan.
Okay.
And
Well, it's
so
been a good year, good 10 years.
it's been a good 10 years, right? And it was a lot of years of suffering when I was a younger kid. So I am taking the light and I'm running with it, right? But like Patrick Mahomes, our quarterback, right? He's a
Right.
phenomenal quarterback, but without a center, right?
Mm,
Without an offensive line, without, Travis Kelce at tight ends, without our wide receivers, without a great defense with Chris Jones and all the guys on the defense, right? It takes everyone to win the Super Bowl, right?
right.
Patrick Mahomes by himself cannot, even as great as he is, cannot will himself or work hard enough to win the Super Bowl.
Right.
It takes that whole team working together, but it takes that leader to get the team moving in that direction, right? So the coaching staff, Patrick Mahomes, to get them focused on what's right, what the goal is, right? And keep them on that track, right? Let's not chase these other things that take away from our times and our talents and slow us down, right? We are focused on this and we constantly work towards that to make ourselves better, to get
Yeah.
to the objective, right? Because there's a lot of shiny objects out there to chase.
Yeah.
Um, and he builds that team, and it takes a whole team effect to do that, to build that team. And believe
Yeah.
me, they've made, teams make a lot of mistakes,
Mhm.
interceptions, right? What happens in the NFL? He goes to sideline. That guy feels horrible, right? But what do his
Yep.
teammates do? What does good teammates do, right? They
Like,
uplift him.
mhm.
They tell him you do have value. You
Yep.
are a good person, right? You may not feel like a good person right now because you just gave a critical interception, right?
Yeah.
But his teammates are there for him to pick him back up because the next series, they need 100% of 100% from that guy.
Hmm. No, I love that analogy. And to flip it on side, like if you have a bad teammate,
Yeah,
if he throws an interception, goes to the
yeah,
sideline, he gets torn down, more
yeah,
than likely he's going to play with more fear and throw
yeah,
more interceptions, more mistakes
yeah,
come. And
yeah,
so I really like that, being a good teammate, and it takes a team.
yeah,
Not no individual contributor is gonna win the
yeah.
Super Bowl, like you're saying. And we just moved to Kansas, so we've officially adopted the Chiefs
There you go.
team. So
There you go.
that's great. Well, thanks for sharing that. I know we've been on, we've been able to talk about a lot.
Yeah.
I kind of just want to end with two more questions, if that's all
Okay.
right.
Yep.
The last one is one I'll ask a majority of people as the last question. But before we get to it, one, I just want to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of share some maybe last advice or a principle that you hope the rising generation of leaders carries forward, whether that's something you've lived by your whole life
Yeah,
or what you follow as a leader. Just something, at least one principle that people like me, you would want to carry forward into their leadership.
yeah. So thanks for asking that question. I will tell you, if you review this or whoever's listening, nothing that I've said is revolutionary, right? Um, it is just basic stuff, right? Discipline. And I will tell you, and that's the difference to me in some good leaders and great leaders is that attitude discipline. The hardest step, the hardest thing I have to do in the morning is turn off my alarm clock, step out of bed, go downstairs and work out,
Hmm.
right? I got to get out of bed.
Yeah.
It's not about hitting the snooze. It's not about making excuses. It's about being disciplined, right? Alarm goes off. I'm super tired. I'm really tired, but I turn it off. I take that first step. The second step's a little bit easier. The third step's better. I get downstairs, right? I exercise. After I'm done exercising, I feel like I'm top of the world, right?
Hmm.
That takes discipline, right? It takes discipline to do that. It takes discipline to do what's right, even when no one's looking, right? Holding the standard, not cheating. It takes discipline.
Hmm.
It takes discipline to speak up, right? That group think. It takes discipline to say, hey, this isn't right.
Hmm.
This isn't right. Like we're not doing right things. We are better than that. We're a better team than that. We're a better organization than that. To be the leader and the dissenter amongst others, that's tough, right? To see a problem and fix a problem, to have enough discipline to not pass something up, right? Fix it, lead it, be in charge, right? There's enough people that can identify problems. The world
Hmm.
is full of people that will tell you everything that's wrong,
Yeah.
right? Be the person who's going to take charge, step out in faith, fix that problem, take charge of that problem, make the organization, push the needle to be, push yourself to be better, push the organization to be better every day. So that's kind of my last tidbit of like, again, what I'm saying is not revolutionary. It's not in a book. I will tell you, I am not a big reader. And I'm not saying that reading doesn't have value. Reading has a ton of value. Um, I just have, I was not blessed with academics and reading. I have a little bit of dyslexia, so reading is not fun for me.
Hmm.
So a lot of my leadership is like through experience-based leadership.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't have like books of recommendation. The world is full of self-help books. Um, and that's okay. If you're a self-help book person, have at it. But we kind of talked about before is, to me, leadership is about experiences, it's about you and me. It's about people. It's about how
Hmm.
we treat people. It's about how we lead people. There were many mistakes that I made in the Army. I made more mistakes and probably more bad decisions than I made good decisions. But I had leaders that had enough grace and forgiveness that knew that I had value to the team. Number one, I didn't make the same mistake twice, right? So if
Yeah.
you continue to make mistakes, there's something wrong with that, right? You can't
Yeah.
do that. But you need to learn, right? You need to reflect on that as well. Like when you make a mistake, learn from it, be better, get sharper, right? And then push that needle farther. And then you're going to make a mistake again. Okay, get up,
Yeah.
stop the alarm, get out of bed, go do PT, get to work, be a valued member, push the needle, own your mistakes, be accountable, don't blame, own those mistakes, learn from those mistakes, stop making the same mistakes, right?
Hmm.
Anyways,
No,
I
I
was
love
almost done. Then I went on a tirade there again at the end. So
that.
sorry
No,
about that.
I love that. And I think like the word you first started with is discipline. It comes down to
Yeah,
that. And something
yeah,
I'm trying to live by, a quote I heard several years ago is the weight of regret weighs
yeah,
tons. The
yeah,
weight of discipline weighs ounces.
yeah,
Um, And I think it's true. And Mark, before we get into the last question, I can just say, like, even though we've spent, I was 14 to 16 years
Yeah,
old being
yeah,
being around you, and then we've seen each other a couple times throughout the years. Like, you are a great leader and you have that discipline. And I think
I appreciate it.
that you're saying what you're saying is not revolutionary, but I think honestly, the boring things, the mundane,
Yeah,
the simple things is what makes great leaders. If
yeah,
you're willing to do the boring things and be disciplined and get that routine and get out of bed, turn the
yeah,
alarm clock off, take the first step and the second, and then you finish your workout. Like,
yeah.
that's what makes great leaders and great people. So I will say that about you for sure from my perspective. But getting into the last question, this is one that I love, and I hope
Yeah.
other people will take from. I'm a man of faith, and I know you are as well in my
Yes,
interactions
sir.
with you. And if you're comfortable with it, I just want to close asking you, how has your faith, and I ask this because people from many religions, different backgrounds, whatever it is, will both be on here and listen to this, hopefully.
Yeah,
So, how has your faith changed you and contributed to your leadership?
yeah. So thanks for asking that. And that, we may come from maybe different theologies or something like that as faith backgrounds, but Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, right? I believe in the Bible. I believe the Bible is true, and I use Him. And it kind of comes around to your first question, right? Who is the greatest leader in your life, right? I kind of said your dad and my dad, but the truth of that statement is Jesus,
Hmm.
right? He is the greatest leader in my life, and when I read the Bible, it fills me up. It gives me strength. It gives me hope. It gives me, the way Jesus lived, right? And I believe that Jesus came to this earth, lived a perfect life, right? He was sovereign. He had authority over everything, right? But if you look at the way in the New Testament, the way Jesus lived, right? He did not live a life of luxury,
Hmm.
right? He came for everyone, not just the rich or the powerful, right? And he kind of turned that triangle upside down and hung out with people that needed him the most, right? The oppressed in our society. Um, and he gave them hope, right? And so that for me is not about, and he was abounding in love, abounding in forgiveness, right? Um, and speaking the truth, right? And speaking the truth and sticking up, And so that has shaped me in my leadership style of just reading the Bible and following the way Jesus led. Right? It wasn't about him having his name on the temple or about how many miracles I can do in one day or metrics based or anything like that. He was there, um, kind of that servant leader. Right? He was sovereign. Right? He could have done anything. And many times in the Bible, he was oppressed. He was, um, you know, charged with things that he never did, right? That he could have just raised up and just spoke the truth and set the record straight, but he didn't, right? He humbled himself before everyone, died on the cross for my sins, right? Showed unbounding forgiveness and grace, love and mercy to everyone. And so in the world, that those some of those traits are not worldly traits, right? The world will tell you, be powerful, be powerful, be oppressive. Like, don't let anyone compete with you. If you see competition, crush it immediately.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just not the way um, my leadership style is built, right? Um, because great leadership like that has great falls. Right? There are many times, like I said, I am not perfect in my life. I've made a lot of mistakes, but the people that have surrounded me, because I've shown them, love, mercy, grace, humility, they've picked me up. Right? Many times in command, I was under investigation for a lot of things that I didn't commit, that happened. But you know what? My soldiers knew that I had them. So in the time of need, they had me, right? And I'm not saying that illegally, right? Please don't take it that way. Like there's
Yeah.
investigations, and I did undue influence to influence soldiers, but they knew what was right. They
Hmm.
knew that I was going to take care of them, and they took care of me. It was just kind of this cycle but if I would have been the hotty toddy, crush, greed, power, right? Most of those soldiers would have said, "Hey, let me help you push you off the ledge,"
Right. Yeah.
and that's a long fall, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, but anyways,
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I could
you
not
bet.
agree more. There's something amazing about how the most powerful person to ever walk the earth is also
Yeah,
the most humble,
yeah,
and was able to bring people to him, and people were drawn to him. So I could
yeah,
not agree more. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as a man of faith as well, that's how I strive to live as a leader, and
yeah.
be more like him. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You bet.
And thank you again, Mark, so much for coming on. To those listening, I hope you learned as much as I have from Mark, both in his military, business, and faith experience. Um, but Mark, just thank you again so much for coming on, and we'll
You
close
bet.
there.
Jackson, enjoyed it, man. Great catching up with you. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Thank you for spending time with us on the Front Lines of Leadership podcast. Leadership isn't about the position you hold, it's about the responsibility you accept and the people you serve. Take a moment to reflect on one principle from today's conversation that you can apply immediately, at work, at home, or in your community. Small, intentional actions compound into real leadership. Subscribe, share, and join us again as we continue to learn from leaders who show us what it means to lead from the front lines.